Robert Miller gave his entire life to his two sons, Daniel and Kevin. Every overtime shift, every missed vacation, every dollar saved was for them. What they did later broke his heart. But he didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg, he simply chose to act quietly. After his wife Eleanor passed away 15 years ago, Robert became both father and mother. He was only 52 at the time, but he never remarried. Daniel was 14, Kevin was 10. They were his whole world. Robert worked as a mechanic in a small auto shop in Ohio. His hands were always rough, his back always tired, but he never complained. When Daniel wanted a computer for school, Robert worked weekends. When Kevin needed braces, Robert sold his fishing boat without hesitation. "Everything I have is yours one day," Robert would tell them with a proud smile. The family home, a modest but beautiful two-story house, was his greatest achievement. He had paid off the mortgage early, determined that his boys would always have security. Years passed. Daniel became a real estate agent. Kevin found a job in marketing. They both started serious relationships, Daniel with Olivia and Kevin with Madison. And slowly, almost quietly, something in the house began to change. Olivia was ambitious and sharp-tongued. Madison was quieter, but observant and calculating. At first they were polite to Robert. They brought flowers, they called him Mr. Miller. But once they began staying over more often, the atmosphere inside the house subtly shifted. "Daniel, we can't build our future living like this," Olivia would whisper at night. "Your father needs his own space, we need privacy." Madison planted similar thoughts in Kevin's mind, talking about modern apartments and fresh starts. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt divided. Daniel and Kevin began having private conversations in the kitchen. Robert would walk in and the room would fall silent. He noticed, he always noticed, but he stayed quiet. One evening, Daniel cleared his throat at the dinner table. "Dad, we've been thinking. Maybe it's time you consider somewhere more comfortable. Somewhere with people your age." Kevin nodded, avoiding eye contact. Robert understood immediately, a nursing home. The word wasn't spoken, but it hung heavy in the air. His chest tightened, but he simply folded his napkin carefully and said, "If that's what you boys believe is best." Within 2 weeks, Daniel had arranged everything. "It's a very nice place, Dad," he insisted. "Green gardens, medical staff, activities." Kevin added, "You won't have to worry about anything anymore." The words sounded caring, but the decision had already been made without him. On moving day, Robert packed a single suitcase. 40 years in that house, and his life now fit into one small case. He paused in the hallway, gently touching the wall where he had once marked Daniel and Kevin's heights as boys. Olivia stood near the door, checking her phone. Madison whispered something to Kevin about repainting the living room. Robert noticed the excitement in their eyes. Not sadness, not hesitation. Excitement. At the nursing home, the director, Mrs. Thompson, greeted him warmly. "You'll be comfortable here, Mr. Miller." Robert smiled politely. He had always been a dignified man. If this was how his sons wanted it, he would not cause a scene. That night, sitting alone on his narrow bed, Robert stared at the ceiling. He replayed every sacrifice, every birthday he worked through, every dream he put aside. His heart hurt deeply. But beneath the pain, something else quietly formed: resolve. The next morning, while Daniel and Kevin were busy discussing renovations, Robert made a quiet phone call. Not to his sons, but to his longtime lawyer, Margaret Collins. She had helped him draft his will years ago, back when the boys still hugged him before leaving the house. "Margaret," Robert said calmly, "I'd like to review everything, immediately." His voice was steady, but Margaret sensed something had changed. She scheduled a visit to the nursing home that very afternoon. When Margaret arrived, Robert explained everything. The move, the pressure, the sudden urgency to relocate him. He then asked one simple question. "Legally, who owns my house right now?" Margaret adjusted her glasses and replied, "You do, Robert, completely and solely." What Daniel and Kevin didn't know was that Robert had never transferred the property into their names. Despite Daniel being a real estate agent, the house remained entirely under Robert Miller's ownership. The taxes, the deed, the title, all his. And what they knew even less was that Robert had added a quiet clause to his will years ago. Any child who abandoned or forced him into care against his will would be removed as primary beneficiary. At the time, it was just a precaution. Now it became a decision. 2 days later, Daniel and Kevin received a formal letter from Margaret Collins requesting their presence at her office. Confused but curious, they arrived together, Olivia and Madison waiting anxiously in the car. Margaret greeted them professionally and slid a document across the table. "Your father remains the sole legal owner of the house," she began. Daniel's face turned pale. Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "There has also been an update to the will," Margaret continued. "Effective immediately, the property will be donated to a Veterans Housing Foundation upon your father's passing. Additionally, Mr. Miller has requested to return to his home next week. Daniel's voice trembled. Return? But we already started renovations. Margaret met his eyes calmly. You started renovations in a house that does not belong to you. The weight of their actions finally settled in. When Robert walked back into his home the following Monday, he did so slowly, with dignity. Daniel and Kevin stood silently in the living room. He did not yell. He did not insult them. He simply said, I gave you everything because I loved you. But respect is not something a father should have to beg for. And for the first time in their lives, his sons truly understood what they had almost lost.